Episode 432, Should Governments Part Own AI Frontier Models?
The AI 6 Podcast with Joanne Sweeney.
The US government could end up owning 5% of OpenAI. According to the Financial Times, the company has held early conceptual talks about giving Washington an equity stake worth around $42.6 billion. Hello, and you're very welcome back to AI 6. I'm Joanne Sweeney on a mission to upskill 500,000 people in AI in just 6 minutes a day. So when I read this story, one question kept coming back to me. If AI is becoming an essential utility like electricity, does it make sense then for governments to part own it? And that's the question I want to explore today. But first, let's get into the story. What's on the table? Well, according to the Financial Times, OpenAI has discussed giving the US government a 5% equity stake, and that would be worth $42.6 billion based on OpenAI's recent valuation of around $852 billion. The talks are described as early and conceptual, and any such arrangement would need major political and legal sign-off in the United States. The same reporting in the Financial Times says Sam Altman has floated a broader idea that America's leading AI developers, including Anthropic, Google, and Meta, would each contribute 5% of their equity into a public wealth fund modelled on the Alaska Permanent Fund. Alaska uses that sovereign fund to invest oil revenues and pay an annual dividend to residents, and Altman's argument is that ordinary citizens should share in the wealth AI creates through a similar public fund. However, none of the other companies has indicated they would take part, and there is no public evidence that Anthropic, Google, or Meta have agreed even in principle to hand over equity to such a fund. Reports also note that beyond OpenAI's own pitch, there are no confirmed talks about government ownership stakes in those other firms. But there is precedence for governments taking direct equity stakes in critical infrastructure and technology sectors. In many European countries, states hold majority or strategic golden share positions in utilities, telecoms or transport companies, partly to secure national control over essential services and networks. Here in Ireland, we have a concrete example. ESB was established in 1927 as a statutory corporation to electrify the country, and it remains majority state-owned today. The Irish government holds around 95 to 97% of ESB shares, with the remainder in an employee share scheme. And the ESB still operates much of our electricity system from the grid to the Electric Ireland retail brand. In other words, we decided that electricity was too important to leave entirely to the market. So when we talk about public ownership of AI companies, we're not inventing a totally new idea. We're asking whether frontier AI models are starting to look more like a grid than a normal consumer tech product. We know that AI is embedded into public services, healthcare, education, and defence, and it will increasingly become important into how governments themselves operate. Back in episode 308 of AI 6, I covered France's defence framework with Mistral, which requires sensitive AI systems to run on French infrastructure. France is pursuing sovereignty through AI infrastructure, and Altman is proposing sovereignty, or at least public stakeholding, through share ownership. There are arguments in favour of governments owning a slice of frontier AI companies. Taxpayers already fund much of the research, the infrastructure, and the basic science that underpins AI, from public grants to university labs, through to subsidies for cloud and chips. So a public stake is one way of capturing some of that upside. If AI disrupts millions of jobs while generating enormous wealth, a public ownership model could help fund retraining, social protection, and perhaps even a form of digital dividend. Some policy thinkers and progressive politicians want to go much further than 5%. US Senator Bernie Sanders is proposing a stake of 50% ownership by governments in these companies. But can a government objectively regulate a company it part owns? Once the state is a shareholder, there's an inherent conflict between maximising public safety and maximizing the value of its stake. And of course, there's broader geopolitical conversations around governance perhaps potentially favouring their own domestic models. And then there's a democratic question. Who controls the shares? Are they held by a technocratic wealth fund or by a ministry within a government? And are the board politically appointed? And let's go back to Europe. We have chosen regulation as our main lever through the EU AI Act, rather than direct equity stakes in frontier model companies. China has leaned towards state direction and heavy involvement in AI and digital infrastructure. And if the US is now experimenting with a hybrid model, so private innovation, but with public equity and possibly an AI wealth fund, Europe might have to look at, well, how do we approach it? Do we go down a similar path? The bottom line is all of this is new. And what we are doing and what we are seeing, in fact, is nations trying to predict what is the best approach for the future of the technology, of economies, but also of its people. So, the question that I started with, I will leave you with. If artificial intelligence is becoming as important as a utility like electricity or like water or like public transport, then how do we see ownership of AI into the future? That's it for today's show. If you're ready to turn these insights into skills, here's how I can help. Get your copy of my book, AI Playbook, on Amazon. It's the perfect companion to the show. For weekly AI strategy, subscribe to my newsletter, Human in the Loop, on LinkedIn. Or if you want to take the next big step, you can take our CPD accredited professional diploma in AI. Maybe you need something more tailored for your organization. You can book a call in my calendar at digitaltraining.ie. Or if you work in government or public sector, go over to publicsectormarketingpros.com. If you found this episode useful, please share it with a pro that you know. And I'd love to read your comments on Spotify. And if you can, take a second to like, rate, or subscribe wherever you listen. It really helps the show. This is AI 6. I'll talk to you on the next episode.